Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. I worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. I worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. Worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life.
Hello, everyone. This is Charles Zuta, your host of the Fountain of Life podcast. It is a real privilege to be coming your way with another episode of this podcast. And today we are continuing with our series, Memory, the Monsters or Ministers. Last week, we had the joy and the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Jonathan Lai about the biological basis of memory. And I did promise that in this second episode, we will be talking with one of the friends of this ministry who is going to be discussing memory, emotions, and their impact on the quality of our lives. So in today's episode, we will be having that discussion with Reverend Osafo Asare Bediako. Reverend Bediako is a licensed professional counselor and a certified professional counselor supervisor. He's been in this field for the past 22 years. He does crisis counseling, critical incident response, emotional awareness training, organizational leadership training, pre- and post-marital counseling, as well as grief counseling and mental health counseling. So he has a wealth of experience in this field. He also has his own private practice in the city of Atlanta, where he provides therapy services. Reverend Bediako also works as a behavioral health clinician and therapist for the city of Atlanta and supports psychological services with the EAP program. But most importantly, Reverend Bediako is an ordained minister of the gospel here and into this program to share a few things with us on memory, emotions, and how those impacts our lives. It's a broad topic and he has a latitude to discuss as widely as he is led. So welcome to this program, Reverend Osafo Asare Bediako.
Thank you, Reverend Zuta.
We want to just, as a housekeeping duty, let you know that in the range of information that we are going to provide today, we are not looking at it for diagnosing or for treating any specific medical condition. So if you do need any medical support, we will recommend you call 911 or book an appointment with your primary care provider. Thank you so much. And once again, it's a real privilege to be coming your way with today's episode as we continue to drill down on memory, its impact on our lives, the emotional trauma that it brings to us, and how we address them. Reverend Osafo, the Bible tells us that for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So God has a standard, or there is something that God aims that in the ideal circumstances, this is what we should be like. But we know it's not always like that. Can you please walk us through how memory, emotions, and all that it dredges up impacts the quality of our lives? Where is the connection, and what makes it so difficult for us to deal with the things that have been a problem for us, in our walk, both with God, with our fellow men, and all of the other things that we have been through in the past?
Thank you, Reverend Zuta. So, um, let me start by saying that there is a distinction between our memory and our emotion and other aspects of our life. At the same time, they are all interconnected. So maybe let me try to kind of define each and every one of them, and then maybe from there we can discuss the other things that we want to talk about. It was beautiful what happened last week when our brother Dr. Jonathan explained some of the biological basis of memory. So usually when you talk about memory, memory is simply the way in which we kind of store information, the way in which we retrieve information later when we need it. And to even address your very first question, whether it is something that is actually a helpful thing or is something that is not so helpful, the truth of the matter is that we need actually who we are, what we do, and everything we do in life is, as a matter of fact, based on the memory that we acquire. So there is this theory that is out there, the tabula rasa theory, which says that everybody is born as a blank slate. Everybody is born with no experiences, no memory, nothing. So it's like a phone that has come that has not been programmed, or a computer that has come with nothing on the hardware or software. I don't know which is which. The computer people may be able to help us better. But you realize that there is nothing at all in the memory bank of that computer. It is the same way in which we are born as humans. So when you take a child, for instance, a child has no memory. A child that is born today has no form of memory stored in his brain. But as a matter of time, or over a process of time, the child begins to acquire new memories, and these memories become the map by which we live our life. So when you talk about memories, they are very, very important to our existence as people. You need to remember how your wife looks like. You need to remember how your husband looks like. You need to remember your way home. You need to remember how your car looks like. So everything is based on memory. And so memory is critical to our existence as people. And with memory, there are different kinds of memory. You have working memory, you have short-term memory, we have long-term memory. And I believe that for the sake of this discussion, we are focusing more on long-term memory, which is the memory that has been stored and which we have acquired and which are long-standing and which we use for our everyday function. But again, memory is very critical, is very important. If for any reason, let's say somebody gets a traumatic brain injury or something, and they lose a portion of their memory, or they lose an aspect of their memory, their life becomes very chaotic. Somebody who has lost their memory can't remember names or can't remember who they are or whatever. You realize that they are in a state of constant confusion because nothing makes sense. And so that's how important memory is. Now, understanding this, you must also understand that memory is processed in a certain way. So we take certain information in, and we kind of process it. And based on how the information we take is processed, it helps us in future when we need to retrieve that information. Let me jump quickly to emotion, and then I'll show how the two are linked. So when you talk about emotion, also, emotion is basically is biologically based, but it is you can see it in the physical, it's psychological, but it's biologically based. And our emotions are based on the interpretation that we give to the things that happen in our environment. So something may happen and a person may like what they see, and as a result, they might be happy. Or something may happen, a person may not like what they see, and so they might be angry, or they might be terrified, or whatever it is. So that is emotion. And so emotions are our expressions that come outward, which are biologically based, based on the interpretation we give to whatever is going on in our environment, right? So when you take something like memory, our memories are formed, in a three-process way, in the sense that whatever information is coming in, we must receive it, or we must encode it, then we must process it, and then we store it, and then we retrieve it. There can be a problem at any stage, whether it's at the stage of how we are encoding it, or how we are storing it, or how we are retrieving it. Now, a lot of times, when memories are being formed, there is a certain kind of emotion that is also going on. Now, because an emotion might be going on with a memory, there is the tendency for the two to be paired together, which is called conditioning. So you condition a certain kind of emotion with a certain kind of memory, and then it is stored in your, for the sake of our term, let's say your brain hard drive, the hippocampus of your brain and the amygdala are more into storing of memory, but for the sake of the everyday person, let's say the hard drive in your brain, just to make it easy for everybody to understand. So this is stored in your brain. Now, if a certain emotion is paired with a certain kind of memory, and the two are stored together, then on the day that memory is being retrieved, even though you are retrieving the memory, the emotion that was paired with it comes along together with the memory. So the memory that you retrieve brought about or brought out that old emotion that you paired with it. That's why sometimes it's like, why am I feeling this way when I remember this? Because in the storing of the memory, it was paired. There was a classical conditioning. It was conditioned with a certain emotion and stored together. So when you retrieve it, you pull both out together. So you talk about memory and well-being, right? Your well-being is simply, your mental well-being is how you are able to function daily, how you are able to go about life without being stressed, how you are able to go about life without falling apart. So again, all the three are interrelated.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, just a quick follow-on question. I mean, understanding these processes helps us to begin to formulate solutions, or to begin to formulate ways that we can be able to mitigate some of the negative effects of some traumatic life experiences or emotions that are hurtful to our survival and our well-being. So thank you so much for giving us that interconnectedness between the two. In certain cultures, we are told that men don't cry, or we should man up. So how do we look at, because you said we have to process the memory and all of that. How, if we are brought up as people and told, oh, man up, men don't cry, this, doesn't it shape the long-term effect of some of these adverse memories on our lives going forward? Because we can't decide which memory is brought up and at what time. But if we are taught not to even recognize that emotion, or to even recognize that thing, but to just shut it in, what is the impact of that? Because memory will do what memory does. It will percolate when it wants. So how harmful or how beneficial is this man up thing that we tend to get, encouraged to do?
So talking about that is a lot of times is cultural, but it is not in the least helpful. When people go through certain challenging situations, right? Let's say somebody goes through trauma, or somebody is dealing with grief, or somebody is dealing with something that is really challenging for them, and they are trying to cry, or they are trying to. So what people don't realize is that when you talk about what is going on with you, when you cry about whatever you are dealing with, is actually a way of processing the pain out of your system. Whatever you don't process, you bottle up and you store. So people have a whole ton of things bottled up and stored. They may say, don't cry now, men don't cry, and then you might not cry, but you'll be surprised that 10 years down the line, something similar may happen, and then you catch yourself falling apart. So that notion of men don't cry, don't talk about it, man up, and all that is not in the least helpful. So we need to talk about our emotions. In certain cultures, they will tell you that, you're a man, is women who talk like this. Don't, it is totally wrong. You have to talk about your emotions so that it doesn't affect you in a negative way. And there are different ways in which they come up. For instance, somebody may see something traumatic, and then, hey, you're a man up, right? And then you don't talk about it. Let me give you an example. Somebody may, for instance, be attacked or face armed robbery or something traumatic may happen to somebody, and they say you're a man, or you think that you are a man, so you have to man up. You don't have to deal with it, and then you don't talk about it. You may not talk about it, but it's stored in your brain, and at some point in life, your brain may recall how dangerous the situation was. And then from nowhere, you realize that you are hit with all kinds of panic attacks. Just 2 days ago, I was talking to somebody who was telling me about a pastor friend who is suffering from serious panic attacks because, that person lost a child, and they treated it as if, it's not a big deal. He's in the hands of God. I'm a man of God. I know what is good. Didn't really grip the process. Now it's hitting him and he's having panic attacks, So we cannot cheat nature. If you can choose not to do anything about it, but it's going to come off in another way.
Right. Coming off in another way. I mean, that is a very fascinating term. So I'll add two questions, but let's look at the entry point, to that. Coming off in another, what are some of the indicators for somebody? You've just cited this person who sadly started having panic attacks. In your experience or dealing with people, what are some of the indicators that there may be deep-seated trauma that this person hasn't processed? We will look at that whole processing thing, in a moment. But what should I look out for? What are some of the emotional or psychological indicators that should sound the bell that no, you have to deal with this?
So usually, depending on how traumatic a situation is, there are people who start having nightmares. There are people who start having cold sweat at night. There are people who become very restless. There are people who start developing symptoms like insomnia, and they were typically not people who had sleep issues. So somebody has all of a sudden developed insomnia. They are taking all kinds of heavy dosage sleep medication, and they are still not sleeping. There is something going on. Sometimes somebody will be like, I'm sitting down and I don't know what is happening, but I find out my heart is beating really quickly and I'm panicking. It's like something is wrong somewhere, something is about to happen, but I can't really put my finger on it. Am I going crazy? And all kinds of things. So those are the ways in which it shows up. Night sweats, cold sweats, tremors at night, nightmares, all kinds of things. There are people who have certain recurrent dreams. Every time you are dreaming the same thing again and again and again and again, or it might not be the same dream, but it's all around the same area. It just tells that there is something really going on with you. There are others who may end up being depressed or extremely anxious or whatever it is. So when these things are happening, know that something is going on that you are not dealing with.
Thank you. So it's so fascinating. I mean, looking, at this as people of faith, sometimes we just lump everything up and just throw it out. Okay, let's deal with this in just one way. But if you look at how people process, some of this, we'll come to the processing aspect. There are three people that I'll talk, about briefly. When Peter ran into problems, after denying Jesus, he didn't talk to anybody. He just said, I'm going fishing. He just buried himself in his work, but at the bottom of it, he was dealing with, the sense of failure and hopelessness and all of those. He just buried himself in his work. Judas confronted the same sense of failure, inadequacy. He went to the wrong people. He couldn't get help. He ended up with self-harm. Now, if you look at these two extremes, of people that we have to, we have to deal with, what should we do if somebody is in this kind of situation? Where do they begin to process that issue? Where do they begin?
So again, when a person is dealing with something, right, the best way to go about it is talking to somebody you really trust about it. If you don't want to go see a professional counselor, maybe because you can't afford one or because you don't know one or whatever it is, you must talk to somebody who is matured enough to know where you are and what you are dealing with. Again, in the case of Judas, it was guilt that pushed him to the point of suicide. He felt guilty, and that guilt could have been resolved, but again, he didn't seek help. He felt horrible, and in the end, he was pushed over the edge. Now, in the case of Peter, even when we recall the story, when Jesus came back after Peter had tried fishing all night and caught nothing, and Jesus brought Peter back, he asked him the same question 3 times. He says, Peter, son of, do you love me? He said, yes, I do. He said, feed my flock, and Jesus asked Peter 3 times the same question. After the 3rd time, Peter did something. He broke out crying. That was when Peter let it go.
Right. Fascinating. Right. So, for the sake of our audience, I'm having a studio discussion with Reverend Osafo Asare Bediako on the Fountain of Life podcast. At some point in today's episode, we will give you the opportunity to ask questions. The contact information will be streaming below your screen. You can call us through WhatsApp, or you can send your questions through YouTube channel or Facebook or whatever medium you are using to follow us today. So thank you so much, and we will really welcome your questions for Reverend Osafo Asare Bediako. Now, that brings us to the kind of people that you have to go to. So what we have talked so far has been always, backward looking. I want us to be a bit forward looking, So forward looking in the sense that if my best friend maybe is going through a lot of trauma or is going through a lot of issues, and I see it, a lot of us become tongue-tied. We really don't know what to say, and most of the issues are things that may be above, our pay grade or above our ability to handle. So like Job's friend, Job calls them miserable comforters are you all. They came to help the guy. They came to sit with him and then try to help him out. But they just didn't know what to say. All the things they said had just been terrible. In the end, God had to ask Job to pray for them and, and all of that. If I am dealing with somebody with that kind of situation, I've been through that process where, I've busted some friendships because I didn't have the right things to say to the person at the right time, and I lost that person. So where do we begin if we identify such a need in somebody that they need to process something that happened in the past, and there's an issue they are dealing with, and we identified, and we want to help them? So this forward looking, as a counselor, what should we, not all of us are trained counselors. What is the primer that anybody can follow in helping somebody in that kind of situation?
What to do, or is not by throwing scriptures at them or telling them what you think is right, you know. And if you don't have any words to tell them, it is okay. Because the truth is that whatever it is that the person is going through, you probably have never been through it, and you really, really don't know how the person is feeling. You know, a lot of times we misinterpret what we think others are feeling, you know. But one thing you can do is to be there for the person, right? So if your friend is going through a difficult challenge, maybe they are going through a traumatic challenge, they are going through a divorce, they are going through a grief, they lost a loved one, a friend that you know, God forbid, was raped by somebody. It is not up to you to tell them, hey, things are going to be all right, let's give it to God, you know, this too shall pass, and all those things. They might sound like nice, catchy phrases, but you know, a lot of times when you do that, they end up being upset with you, or they look at you funny, really, you know. But what you can do is to be there for them. I am here for you. I'm a shoulder for you to cry on if you need one. If you want to talk about something, I'll be here to listen. And even in listening, I'm not listening to give you solution. You know, I tell people, a lot of people who even come to see me in counseling, I tell them that a lot of the challenges that you have, you already know the answer to it. I'm not here to tell you the answer. I'm here to help you explore what you already know, so you make the best decision for yourself. Being there for somebody, comforting somebody, that is the most important thing. So I'm here for you. That's all you need to be. Maybe somebody lost a loved one. You don't have to say anything to them, but I'm here for you. And if there's anything you need me to help you with, that's okay. You know, it is okay to even sit with a person and say nothing. And if you are that close enough, maybe put your hand on their shoulder or something. You don't always have to say something. You know, otherwise you become like Peter on the mountain of transfiguration. You'll just be saying words amiss.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We are quick to talk, we are quick. We feel that by the words that we speak, we kind of try to bring consolation, but sometimes silence is golden, so it's always best to just be there for them. Like you're saying, just be there. Let them know that you are around to help them. Now, back to the individuals, we know that memory, when they were stored or moved, they might have been associated with this emotional thing that goes along with them. So when they are retrieved, you kind of pull up the whole package. Now, if somebody wants to move on past the situation, what do they have to build a new narrative around the issue? How do they begin to desensitize themselves to that emotional pathways that are associated with that memory?
Right? If somebody stored up a memory in a negative way, let's put it that way, or somebody stored up a memory that was traumatic and it was associated with a certain kind of emotion, every time it pops up, that emotion pops up. So what we need to do is that remember that you processed it. Whatever was going on, you received that. So you decoded that message. And during the point of decoding, you attached a certain emotion to it, whether it's an emotion of fear, an emotion of anger, an emotion of whatever. You attach that emotion to it, you processed it, and you stored it in your memory bank, right? And that every time you remember that situation, that emotion comes up with it. So to undo that, we have to pull that out, that memory out. And that's why sometimes when people go to therapy or something like that, they let you talk and they try to reach, depending on the kind of the therapist, into your unconscious or things that you are really not wanting to talk about and all kinds of things. The whole goal is to pull it out, right? Once we pull it out, we are going to take every emotion and then we are going to look at how you process the information. Did you process it right? If you didn't process it right, then maybe we can help you process it right. So we are going to do reprocessing before you store it again. So there are different ways, and then if you have been sensitized to certain things, like you said, we need to desensitize it. So there are different methods and different ways in therapy. We are not going to go deep into that. But for instance, if somebody has been in a very traumatic situation and they are having it difficult in life, they can't function because they keep on remembering that situation and it's causing them to really have a hard time. In therapy, somebody may do EMDR, and that, for instance, will help you pull the information, right? And then we reprocess it, and then you store it again in another way so that you can deal with it better. So it's all about pulling it out and reprocessing it. But if we leave it the state where it is, how it is, then every time it's going to come back the same way. So it's like the same way on a computer. If you store an information wrongly, every time you retrieve it, you retrieve the wrong information. But if you bring it up and you make a correction and you store it again, then when you pull it out, you get the right information.
Right. So this is more like doing savers. You pull it out and they do savers. So
whatever.
Does it help us then in building that new narrative? Does it matter? For instance, there may be people who are not of faith, or there may be people who are of faith. If you're a person of faith, maybe you want to look at things through the lens of the scriptures. And if you are not of faith, maybe they may go to some other avenues. Does it matter what sort of information I'm adding on to that memory to create that save as that new file that I want to now represent that situation in my memory banks? Does it matter?
Yes, it matters, because whatever you are doing must be something that is helpful to you. And if you're a person of faith, yes, it's only there are other things that can be done for people who are people without faith as well, because the whole goal is to reprocess that memory. We are going to re-examine it, what really happened. Again, remember that when it comes to traumatic memory, it is the amygdala which is responsible for processing that, right? Now, how the amygdala works is that the amygdala is in charge of fighting or running, fight or flight, it's the part in our brain that warns us of danger, 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 danger. Do something about the danger. Do something about the danger, right? And so let me even backtrack a little. So let's say somebody went to war. The person is a veteran. They went to war. They saw people die. They dealt with a lot of traumatic things. They smelled some smells. They heard some sounds. Their eyes saw certain kinds of light. They heard some kind of noises and that was a very terrible time in their life, right? And during that time, anytime there was a loud sound, they jumped to the ground to avoid being hit by a shrapnel or something. That is how it was processed and stored. That soldier may, for instance, return from war. They are back in society, and then something happens, and maybe a car is passing, the exhaust goes boom, and what is the first thing they do? They jump to the ground, because it's stored in the amygdala, which says that, you know what, this was what you did to survive. Remember that your memory is your map for survival. Without your memory, you'll be disoriented. You can't survive. So you hear the boom, and immediately what goes on in your mind is, okay. So before you know, you jump and you're on the ground, and everybody is looking at you funny, but you know why. So now we have to reprogram you to an extent that, okay, you are safe now. So when you hear that loud noise, it doesn't mean that it's danger. It's not a bomb. It's not a gun. It's not a shrapnel. You don't need to be on the ground. So it's about reprocessing it.
Right. So in effect, it's situation specific.
Situation specific.
Right. Thank you so much. So having a live discussion with Reverend Osafo Asare Bediako, a licensed professional counseling supervisor. And we are looking at memory and emotions and its impact on the quality of our lives. Once again, I want to remind you that you can send us your questions, and we will be able to answer them in the time that we have. So thank you so much for being a part of today's episode. Now, we want to be forward-looking once again. One of the things that have come up lately is the psychological effect of social media on our youth and even grown-ups. Like you mentioned at the beginning, children are born with blank slates. They are now laying down their memory banks, and they are laying down their experiences in life. A lot of the things that happen in social media can be traumatic to a young developing child, like rejection. I keep telling people that like and unlike button in social media is one of the most damaging things, in that technology. So if somebody is experiencing rejection, or they look at some imagery on social media and it leads them to a low self-esteem and all of that, as parents and maybe custodians of youth or children, what are the things that we should be discussing with our young people in terms of the impact of social media on their overall mental well-being, in terms of memory and emotional damages that will be created?
Okay, thank you. So social media has both good and bad sides, right? So again, let me start with the good sides before I go to the other side. In these times of COVID, where there are restrictions, where there's a lot of people who can see each other and all that, social media has become a very useful platform for human contact. Even though it is not the best, it is still a form of platform for contact, which is important, because without human contact, our life gets into a spiral as well. So human contact is important. Again, there are a lot of things that we probably can't go out and do that people do on social media. So that is a plus to it. Now, the challenging part of it is that because it is not in person, people can easily hide behind social media and do all kinds of things, including abominable things, right? There's a lot of bullying, there's a lot of lying, there's a lot of false imagery. There's a whole lot of things that are going on in social media. And usually when people are on social media, they are not portraying the whole truth as it is. They are only portraying what they think look good, and so when we are talking to the young ones, when we are talking to the youth, when we are talking to even adults, we need to let them understand that when you are dealing with things on social media, deal with it like something on a Chinese movie. In a Chinese movie, somebody can jump up and fly and climb a tree and all kinds of things. It's a movie, it's not reality. So we need to let people understand that what happens on social media is actually not a reality. It's part entertainment, part truth. You have to decipher, and if the brains of your children or the youth or whoever it is, everything has age appropriateness with it. Even when you are watching a movie, they say this is a PG-13, this is a 16, this is an R-rated movie. Why? Because they realize that brains are not developed to some extent to do some things, or sometimes they'll say, do not try this at home, and all kinds of things. That's a warning. Unfortunately, social media doesn't come with all that. So it's up to parents to actually warn children that there is a tendency that somebody may bully you. Bullying is real. There is a tendency that somebody may say something to give you a poor self-image. Don't pay any attention to them. Don't listen to them and all kinds of things. And people are looking for love and people are looking for attention and whatever on social media. They need to understand that that really doesn't happen. So we need to educate them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we all enjoyed the wonderful Chinese movies in the past. They are fun to watch. Great. All right. So the lines will be opened and you are free to send in your questions to Reverend Osafo Asare Bediako. In a lot of ways, we are dealing with this emotional trauma. We are dealing with there are also memories that are beneficial to us. What are the ways that we can enhance or augment the ministerial part or the ministering part of memory? We've looked at when memory is a monster, we've seen all that we can do and all of that. Now, what do we do to elevate and to strengthen memory as a minister?
So to strengthen memory as a minister, you choose what you want to store. We are bombarded with thousands of information every day. We don't store every information. I have driven today. I have passed many cars. I knew I passed many cars. I don't recall one of them, how they looked, unless maybe somebody was behind you honking or misbehaving. Then you might remember how their car looked, because that did some imprinting on your mind. Again, we have the ability to choose what we want to store. It's like we decide to go to school and we learn. We learn what we want to learn. In the same way, since our memories are our maps or what guides us in life, we must be careful the kind of memory we want to recall at a later date, the kind of events we want to recall at a later date, what we think is beneficial. Now, when you even look at how God dealt with his people, when the Israelites were crossing the Red Sea, when they were crossing the Jordan, God said, pick up stones for a memorial, so that every time God wanted something to be present for them to remember, so that you choose what you want to remember. Again, it's very important. Some people have the habit of choosing to remember bad and negative things. The choice is yours. So I can remember every bad thing that somebody did and then forget about every good thing they did. It's my choice. So I can store that and it will be stored. Or I can choose to store the good things. I like something that the Bible says in the book of Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8. Talking about the kinds of things that we should store. Again, remember that when it comes to memory, it is we storing something, what we encode, what we store, that we retrieve, right? So it says that finally, my brethren, whatever things are true. So if you are storing something, store something that is true. Whatever things are honest, when you are storing, store something that is honest. Whatever things are just, store what is just. Whatever things are pure, store what is pure. It says that whatever things are lovely, you can choose to store lovely things, lovely emotions, lovely memories, lovely things. Sometimes people get married and they get divorced, and then you may ask one partner about their ex-partner, and somebody will say all lovely things. And you're like, why did you divorce the person anyway? And for another person, after a divorce, there is not one single thing the person did right. They were so horrible, even on their wedding day, they knew it, So whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of a good report, then it goes on, it says that if there is any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. The things that we think about, they are the things that we remember. So it says that make a conscious effort to think about the good things, the lovely things, the pure things, the good report things. Don't think about the bad report things, because whatever we re-emphasize, again, memory is a process of learning, and whatever material you learn is what you retain. So retain the positive things, and it will affect you in life the positive way.
Wonderful and engaging conversation with Reverend Asare Bediako. As we draw this conversation to a close, if there is any one thing that I have learned, talking with you, is this last verse that you quoted. Our lives are the fruits or the products of the things that we put within ourselves. And those things that we may not have control over, the abusive situations, the divorces, the trauma, and all of those negative things, our guest today has explained to us how we can be able to rewrite those memories and then to be able to save us. So I don't know what your life experience has been listening to this series so far, but I'm so grateful to Reverend Osafo Asare Bediako for spending time with us. We will have him back again on the Fountain of Life podcast. But for the time that we have left, we want to go into the hopper to see if there are any questions or comments that we have. So I'll ask my technical team if they can look on YouTube or any of those other outlets to see if we have received any questions for our dear guest today. All right, so far it looks like we don't have any questions, but that doesn't mean you cannot send any questions to Fountain of Life podcast to be forwarded to Reverend Asare Bediako. So thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this episode, either watching or listening to it. There will be subsequent episodes on this theme, and we will be drilling down to look at some of the things that Reverend Asare Bediako had spoken about, how to process memory. We'll be looking at some specific examples. For instance, we all read Psalm 137 about the dilemma of the people in Babylon in captivity, and we see the series of the things that our guests have spoken about. They sat down, they wept when they remembered Zion, they hung their harps, and they said they couldn't sing the Lord's song. These are facts. They have scientific rationale for their behavior. We'll be drilling down in some of this and looking at how to process memory. So I would like you to continue joining us on this podcast, Fountain of Life podcast, and we are continuing the series, Memory, Is It Minister or Monster? So once again, thank you so much, Reverend Osafo Asare Bediako. And my prayer is that God will continue to use you to heal the broken hearts, because God is in the business of clothing us, giving us beauty for ashes. He's in the business of helping us to comfort those who mourn. He is in the business of taking away our tattered clothes and clothing us with the robes of righteousness. So that is God. He's not condemning us. And he actually wants you to come and talk over it. Judas fled. He didn't want to talk. If maybe he had gone to Jesus to talk things over, it would have had a different outcome. We don't know. I don't want to speculate. But God is inviting us to come and talk about it. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. He is still in the business of healing our broken hearts, healing our battered memories, because he hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of love, of power, and of a sound mind. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, and join us again next Sunday for another episode of the Fountain of Life. My technical team just said there has been a question, or there's a question on YouTube. So can we have that question? If you can share it with us, and then we will discuss it before we sign off on today's episode. Right. So the question is, what do you do when you know of someone who has been traumatized and is affecting his behavior but refuses to seek help? What do you do? So that places it squarely on you, our counselor. And if you have any thoughts on it, Reverend Osafo.
There must be a reason they are refusing to seek help. So first of all, you must try to hear them out. Why don't you want help? Maybe it's because they think nobody can help them. Or maybe they are too embarrassed to talk about their trauma. Maybe they have sought help before from somebody and it didn't go too well. There could be 1,000 reasons why they don't want to seek help. Usually when you tell people to seek help, even in the mind of some, it means that they are incapable of helping themselves. So it could be a cultural thing. I must be macho because if I go seeking help, everybody is going to look at me as a weakling. That might be the reason they don't want to seek help. The very reason a lot of men don't even want to go for marriage counseling, because you know what? Nobody can tell me how to marry my wife. So there are many reasons why people don't want to seek help. It is always good to hear them out. Why don't you want to seek help? Maybe you have a valid reason, and again, when all is said and done, is it, what's the name of the man that dipped in the Jordan 7 times? Layman. The young lady said, if he had told you to do something outrageous, you probably would have done it. What do you lose from just going to dip in the Jordan 7 times? Maybe just seek help. If you don't get there, if they can't help you, then maybe you sought help and didn't get the help, right? But if you don't seek help, you never know. It's like having worms in your stomach and you decide that you won't deworm. Because you don't see the difference. So you deworm, you know the difference. So you just encourage people, but you can't really force anybody. You can encourage people, you can hear them out. And sometimes some people need space, or some people need to know that, this is really overwhelming. Maybe they have not hit their rock bottom yet. If they do, they will seek help. So don't force anybody to get help. Just encourage people to get help. So again, when we talk about mental health is a whole lot of range. I think that for a lot of times, because of how the word mental health is used, or how the word counselor is used, or psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever is used, people associate it with, that if you have mental health, it means that you're a full-blown schizophrenic person and all kinds of things. And even then, right, there is nothing wrong with a schizophrenic person. People tend to shy away from what they don't understand, and when people don't understand something, they mystify it. And sometimes when it comes to mental health, the way they mystify it is not in a positive way. And then in certain cultures, they look down on people with mental health. Some people make mockery of people with mental health and all that. So sometimes people don't want anything to do with anything associated with mental health, because they don't want to be looked at funny. They don't want to be stigmatized. They don't want to be laughed at, or whatever it is that is going on in their head. But this is what I always tell people. Now, if you wake up in the morning and you have a very bad toothache, will you call your dentist and try to see your dentist so that you can get help with your tooth? If you wake up in the morning and you are having some pains at certain parts of your body, will you get medicine? If your eye is giving you problems, will you see an eye doctor so that you get glasses or whatever it is? Then what is wrong with if there is something going on with your brain? Why do you choose not to see somebody who can help you process things right? So again, we have to let go of some of those things. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. It's like the person who is sick and say, I won't go to the hospital. When I go to the hospital, it means I have no faith. Sometimes I look at them funny. In the same way, when you are dealing with some emotional issues and you say, I won't go see a counselor or I won't seek help because it means I'm soft, I look at you funny. Get help. There is nothing wrong with getting help. And we have to erase that notion that there's something wrong with getting help.
Right. So in summary, this person has to, we need to understand why they don't want to get help. And then we take the next steps from there. Maybe you might want to bring somebody else, an elder person or somebody in the family, to intervene and to see if they can nudge this person to get help. But we need to understand first. All right. So any other question? All right. So once again, you've been listening or watching the Fountain of Life podcast, the live studio session with Reverend Osafo Asare Bediako, who is a professional counselor and has his counseling practice, holistic counseling services in the city of Atlanta in the U.S. state of Georgia. And I want to express my sincere gratitude for your time and for sharing with us on the Fountain of Life podcast. And for all our audience who's joining today and those who download this podcast, I say thank you so much and may God richly bless you. Let's see you again next Sunday as we continue looking at this series, Memory is a Monster or Minister. God richly bless you. Amen.
Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. I worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life, restorer of my soul. I worship you today. Lord, you are restorer of my soul, worship you today. Lord, you are the fountain of life. You restore my soul. I lift my hands to worship you today. Soul, and drink, for there's peace, there's joy, and there's hope for the weary soul. Lord, you are the builder of my soul, the fountain of my life. I worship you today. Lord, you are the builder of my soul, the fountain of
The book of Matthew 11:28-29. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest